I don't know if any of you have ever been to Mexico and bought alcohol in a store. You know, you buy a bottle of tequila for I don't know what here. You go to Mexico, you get a gallon of tequila for 50 cents. That's what it costs to produce it, you know. The rest of it is all taxes. So anyway, stuff is very, very cheap. But in order to have it cheap that way in Germany, you have to have the wine that's produced right at that vineyard, which means it's more alcoholic later in the year and less alcoholic earlier in the year, because they take it right out of the vats where it's aging. Then once it's bottled and gone, you don't get it. You get the next year's thing. But I was there one time. It was really funny. We would go around, and when we arrived in Germany, I would say it tasted flat out like grape juice. You know, good grape juice, but grape juice, you know. By the time we left, it was wine, you know, it was really wine. But you went around from place to place and just, you know, kind of the way it was done. So the danger with new wine is that you drink too much of it because it's like grape juice. And when you think about it, all these people understood the apostles in their own language. How could someone not see that as a miracle? How could someone begin to scoff at that? And you have to understand that one of the things about being a human being, you and I go into things with a certain optic. Like if you were to take Jesus, when Jesus came among the people, there are a group of people, the Pharisees, who were threatened as teachers because Jesus came in and he never had a teacher. And you can't have someone teaching who's never had a teacher. You can't have someone brilliant who's never had a teacher. So they were against anything he said long before he said it. The priests were really against Jesus because he was so popular. He was taking people away from them. And it didn't matter what he was saying or how he was speaking. And you know, you and I have got to be able to learn to listen to someone and to hear whether God's speaking through them before we judge it from our own optic. Politically, in the United States, we're being torn apart as a country that way. Liberal people will not listen to any conservative no matter what they say. And conservative people will not listen to any liberal no matter what they say. And each side seems convinced the other side's demonic. Okay? That tears a country apart. The fact of the matter is, you need to be able to listen to opposing opinions and decide whether or not they're good. Because you listen to it doesn't mean you believe it. But you have to be able to listen to it to decide whether you will accept it or not. And that's very important in religion. There are many people who speak very differently than you and I do in the church. And ultimately the church moves that way. You know, that those of us who knew the church before and after Vatican II know it's a very, very different church. But the whole church was changed by that council. The church is changing right now, radically changing because of the new Pope and the way he's going about things and his attitude to poverty. It is changing the church. And you know, the fact of the matter is, the church is a living entity. The church is the bride of Jesus Christ. And so this church grows and develops. And any one of us who isn't open to growing and developing will be left behind. We need to grow and develop as the church goes, and we listen to the things. And things you accept, good. Things you reject, fine. But listen to them. It isn't that you have to take everything. But we need to be a people who listen to one another. I'll tell you, when I was first ordained, I made it a resolution in my life that I would never try and convert anyone. That my entire life I would always try for mutual comprehensibility. That when I talked to a person, I wanted them to understand what I was saying, and I wanted to understand what they were saying. I believe that if I understand what you're saying, and you understand what I'm saying, we'll both agree on the truth. Because I think truth has power. But don't seek to convert. Just seek to come to the truth. Because I'll tell you a secret that you all know. The truth is Jesus. So if you get people to the truth, you've got them. Okay? You don't need to convert them. Let Jesus do that. That's his job. Okay? The next thing is, we go now, having had this crowd, Peter goes out to speak to them. You know, it's very strong in religious people. When you gather a crowd, you always do something. In Peter's day, when you got a crowd together, you preached. In our day, you get a crowd together, you take a collection. But anyway, the idea is once you get the crowd gathered, as a religious leader, there's something you're supposed to do. So Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice, and proclaimed to them, "You who are Jews, indeed all of you staying in Jerusalem, let this be known to you. Listen to my words. These people are not drunk as you suppose, for it's only 9 o'clock in the morning." I am presuming that Peter, unlike most of us, has never seen anyone drunk at 9 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, he says, "No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. It will come to pass in the last day, God says, that I will pour out a portion of my Spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men dream dreams." I'd like to look for a moment at that. Young men see visions, old men dream dreams. I'd like you to notice, to me personally, that's the difference between being young and old. A young person sees visions. They see things to do. An old person thinks about things without any thought that it might be done. So like, for instance, a young person will think about the house they would really like to live in. And they would like to one day make enough money to build that house. That's what they really are doing. An old person will think about a house that they would like to live in and daydream about it. But there's no thought of moving to it. The way to preserve youth is always envision and never daydream. Look forward to what you're doing, not just daydream. You have all of eternity to daydream. Okay? You can look forward to what you're doing. That is what creates youth. It's one of the really important things to remember. You must have a goal beyond you, or you can't do that. If your goal is for your life, your goal will diminish as your life goes on, because your ability to do those things sort of diminishes. But you know, if you have a goal beyond yourself, let's say you have a goal for the United States as a country, that's going to continue beyond you. And you can work towards that goal even as you're dying, because that goal will be carried on long after your death. If you envision a goal for the church, if you envision a goal for your family through children or grandchildren, there are 1,000 ways to envision a goal that is beyond you. But make sure you have a goal beyond your life. Because if you don't have a goal beyond your life, your youth will diminish with age. Okay? And I've mentioned to somebody, I probably have told you this before, but you know, I come from a family that lives a very long time, and simultaneously it's a family in which people tend to remain rather young. And I don't know if I told you this before, but like my grandmother died at 106. It's always interesting when I go into a doctor, because they ask you, when did your father die? And I look at him and I say, my father's not dead, you know. And they, you know, well, when did your grandmother die? About a week ago, actually, you know. But the fact of the matter is, my grandmother died at 106, went for her second marriage at 97. Her first marriage lasted 62 years. I mean, the thing is, and she was a young, vibrant woman her entire life. She died at home in bed, okay? Just woke up one morning dead. That was it, okay? But just died at home in bed. She was never in a rest home, never. She was in a hospital twice. The first time she was in a hospital, she was in her 80s, hanging curtains, standing on a step, on a chair on top of a coffee table. And it fell down and she broke her hip. And so she went into the hospital, and the doctor confided to us that a broken hip at that age was Mother Nature's way of saying goodbye, okay? So after my grandmother recovered and came home, 6 years later, with great pride, she took me to the doctor's funeral. Okay? Granny was just fine, thank you very much. Okay. So, but this idea of always being a person, you have no idea how long your physical life is. That's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is living until you die. That's the thing. And that has to do with envisioning. That has to do with envisioning. Don't daydream. Vision about what you're going to do. It can be something simple about planting your garden or anything like that, but envision something beyond you. And I remember another interesting thing about my mother. About 1 week before she died, she went out in the yard and planted 8 jacarandas. I don't know if you know what jacarandas are. They're a tree that gets a blue flower on them, and then all the leaves fall off, so they look like blue. You know, she never saw one of them come up, and she knew she wouldn't. My mother was dying of lung cancer. She knew she would never see one of them come up. It didn't matter. She knew there would be a row of jacarandas there one time. That's envisioning. You go beyond your life, and that's what gives you life and strength, and that's what gives you youth. One of the things my dad told me, he said at the age of 50, age becomes a number. You'll sometimes meet people 55 who are 100 years old, and you sometimes meet people 100 years old who are 30. The thing is, after 50, it's only a number. But before that, you know, it's an age. But after 50, an age is just a number, okay? It says, indeed, upon my servants and my handmaids, I will pour out a portion of my spirit in those days, and they shall prophesy. So he says he'll pour out a portion of the Spirit. I'd like you to know that in the Jewish scriptures, never once does the fullness of the Spirit come on anyone. If you read through the Jewish scriptures, you'll discover, first of all, they receive a portion of the Spirit. Do you remember when Elijah was going to heaven in the chariot, and his sidekick Elisha was there? And Elisha said, Father, may I have your portion of the Spirit? Do you notice he didn't ask for the Holy Spirit? He asked for just the portion, because in the Jewish scriptures, no one receives the Spirit in fullness. You receive a portion. Also, do you remember the stories about Saul and David, where they talked about the Spirit coming upon them and doing things and going? No one ever had the Spirit stay with them. The first time in the entire Bible that the Spirit rests on a person is when the Holy Spirit comes on Jesus at his baptism. It will say, the Spirit came in the form of a dove and rested on him. With Jesus, the thing that happens is no one receives a portion. Everyone receives the completeness of the Spirit, and no one sees it go. It will stay with you. Now the idea is you can use as much of the Spirit as you want. You can give as much freedom to the Spirit as you want, or you can contain the Spirit. And I always like to, I don't know how many of you have ever been on a sailboat, but I always like to think of it in terms of a sailboat. When you get on a sailboat, the major force on the sailboat is wind, okay? That's what moves the boat. But you can do one of two things. One thing is to follow the wind and let the wind take the boat, and it'll do that very, very well. The second thing you can do, by tacking the boat and using the rudder and everything, you can pretty well direct it. Now, you can't completely direct it because it's the force of the wind, but you can pretty well direct it. And we all have that. The Holy Spirit comes upon us, and if I have great faith, I'll let go of the rudder, bite my lip, and go where it goes. And those are the people of the most power. Most of us control it a little. Okay? That we want to go, but not totally that direction, you know? And so we control the Spirit one way or another. And God allows for that. But the fullness of the Spirit is there. Anytime you want to let go of the rudder, you can be Mother Teresa. Anyone can do it. Anyone has the opportunity. Just let go of the rudder. And what I think happens in human life is that you and I give God more and more opportunities. And as we see them work out, we begin to trust God more and more. It's like being a human being, you know? When you have a human being around, they ask you to do certain things, and you know, they may ask you to do something that sounds kind of crazy or frightening. If you enjoy it, then you listen to them the next time they ask you to do things until finally you're completely comfortable with all the crazy things they want to do. They call that a marriage, incidentally. Okay, so that when you go along, you sort of have this way of dealing with people, and we do. I think most of us do that with God. He says, "And I will work wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below, blood, fire, a cloud of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood, before the coming of the great splendid day of the Lord." Now you notice everyone thinks of those things in terms of the apocalypse. But you know those things all refer to the Exodus. That's what happened during the Exodus. In the Exodus, there was blood, the water turned to blood, fire and smoke. Remember that cloud that led the Jews? During the day you could see the smoke. At night you saw the fire inside of it. But it was a pillar of fire and smoke. There was the darkness. Remember, there was such darkness in Egypt that no one could move around at all. And the idea of the moon turned to blood. And all of this, and I don't know if you've ever seen the moon turn to blood. I've seen it happen 3 times, and what usually causes it is the smoke from a fire. If you're in an area where there's a fire, you'll see the moon go a blood red. And it's because of the smoke from the fire does it. And it was the smoke in Egypt. And this is all before the coming of the great day of the Lord. What's the great day of the Lord? The great day of the Lord is when you experience your freedom, when you fully experience what it is to be a child of God. That was the great day of the Lord for the Jews. The great day of the Lord for the Jews was when they said goodbye to Egypt. That was their great day. Okay? He says, "And it shall be that everyone shall be saved who calls upon the name of the Lord." Okay? Salvation is for everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord. Okay? And all a person has to do is turn to the Lord. The Lord offers this fullness of spirit, this power. All this is available to anyone just for asking. And I think, the fact of the asking and receiving the power is not the issue. I think most of us do that. Most of us will not give it the freedom. And one of the reasons is, there's 2 things involved. One thing is the freedom that I would like and how I limit the freedom. And the second thing is how the community limits the freedom. An example, you take praying aloud in tongues. You can't do that in most Catholic churches. You throw your hands up in the air and start praying in tongues, you'll find yourself in a police car quickly. Okay? If you go to a charismatic meeting and they're standing praying in tongues, no one has any problem with that. But if you sit quietly in your chair and read while everyone's praying in tongues, you'll find yourself in the same police car. People think something's wrong. We are very judgmental as a people. And we should be a people when we come together that if someone wants to kneel, they should be comfortable. Someone wants to sit, they should be comfortable. Someone wants to stand, they should be comfortable. Someone wants to scream, they should be comfortable. Someone wants to sing, they should be comfortable. Someone wants to pass out, they should be comfortable. Well, let's face it, everyone who passes out is comfortable. But anyway, the rest of the things, we should be a people that allow that kind of freedom. Do you remember the story of Lazarus? Do you remember when Jesus cured Lazarus? It says Lazarus came out and Jesus commanded them to unwrap him. Jesus could have unwrapped Lazarus. If Jesus could raise him from the dead, he could have put him in a Brooks Brothers suit, He could do anything he wanted. But the fact of the matter is, it's a community that gives people freedom. So Jesus wanted them to understand, while he put life in Lazarus, that community had to give him the freedom to live it. In the same way, Jesus Christ offers the Holy Spirit to all of us, but we need to give one another the freedom to express that Spirit. So there are 2 limits on the Spirit: the community in which we live and our own nervousness about where the Spirit will take us. But if you get over those 2 things, you become a person like history does not know. Just unbelievable people. And we have been very lucky in our lifetime because we've seen 2 examples of that. John Paul II and Mother Teresa. We've seen 2 very powerful examples of people who let go of the rudder and did exactly what the Spirit wanted. It's not easy to do that, and God, who is very kind and gentle, will wait until we're ready, okay? Even if it waits our whole life and it never happens. God is kind and gentle, okay? He says, you who are Israelites, hear these words. Jesus the Nazarene was a man commended to you by God with mighty deeds, wonders, and signs, which God worked through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. Okay? One of the things that he does in preaching is begin with what the people already know. He says, you know that Jesus did all these things, and he couldn't do them unless God approved. So he says, you know he did all these things under the power of God. When you want to discuss religion with a person, one of the very first things to do is find common ground. Once you find common ground, you can discuss religion. But like a common ground, if I'm talking to a Muslim, a common ground is there is only one God. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Muslims do not think we believe there's only one God. Muslims think we believe there are three gods. Okay? So what you want to do is establish common ground. There is only one God. And what's the next common ground with the Muslims? Abraham. We both hold Abraham. We both hold common ground of the single God. And then you can begin your discussion. But to begin a discussion, always start with common ground. People who are abrasive in a discussion always begin with the differences. If you begin with the differences, a discussion is always abrasive, but begin always with common ground. He said, this man delivered up by the set plan and foreknowledge of God, you killed, using lawless people to crucify him. Okay? Now, the key thing that Peter is getting at here, and I guess we're going to have to stop with it, but the key thing that Peter's getting at here is this is the set plan of God. And you need to realize, even though you and I do things, understand that is all within the plan of God. If I could use the example, if we decided that we were going to do the play Romeo and Juliet, you could decide whether you're going to be Romeo or Juliet or the father of Romeo or the best friend of Romeo or the maid of Juliet. Or, I mean, we could go through all this kind of thing. Do you know what you couldn't decide? That Romeo and Juliet are going to be alive at the end of the play. Romeo and Juliet end the play dead. That's it, okay? You can't decide that I want to be Romeo, but I never want to talk to the woman on the balcony. No, if you're Romeo, you talk to the girl on the balcony, okay? And I'd like to be Juliet, but I don't want to take poison. No, you're going to be Juliet, you take poison, okay? You need to understand that's the way God's view of history is. Our God has set up history. History begins, let there be light, and it ends with praise be Jesus Christ. That's history. That's the way it is. That's the play, flat out. Now, if you want, you can take different parts. You could be Pilate, or you could be John. You could be the Virgin Mary. You can take any part you want. You can take a friend of Jesus. You can be an enemy of Jesus. You can be a persecutor of Jesus. You can be indifferent to Jesus. You can take any part you want. What you can't do is change the play. The play does not change. It begins, let there be light, and it ends with praise be Jesus Christ. That's all. Okay? Pick your part, any part you want, lots of parts open. Okay? Pick the part you want. How many of you have ever seen the Oberammergau Passion play? Okay? If you ever get a chance to go, go. One of the reasons is it's the largest group of people I've ever seen on stage in my life. You know? They must bus people in from other countries. Oberammergau Passion play takes place in Germany every 10 years. Every 10 years, okay? The next time, what's this, 213? The next time is 220, okay? So anyway, the idea is there are lots of parts and you pick a part. But once you pick a part, the play cannot change. You participate in the play as it goes. And that's the way the plan of God is. There are lots of parts, lots of positions, lots of places you can go. But no one will ever change the play. The play is going to end with the glorification of Jesus Christ, whether people like it or not. Thank you very much.